We're taking a walk, getting out into the woods. We're going to talk deload weeks. If you're a lifter, you've probably taken them. They're normally just built into the program itself. But what if I told you that you are actually leaving gains on the table by just arbitrarily building them into your program and not auto-regulating your deload weeks? Welcome back to the channel. For everybody that does not know me, my name is Kyle. I'm a strength coach, a doctor of physical therapy, and the founder of Athletic Resilience. We are going to, on this walk, start talking a little bit about deload weeks because I had a conversation with an athlete that came up because she finally had a week when she was lifting and everything started to tank and she wanted to know why. So that's what we are going to sit down and kind of have a little bit of a chit chat today about while I'm out and about putzing through the woods. So anybody that is lifted for any extended period of time normally has gone through periods of deload, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, however many you may need based on the training that you've been doing. But 9 out of 10 times they are just automatically written into the program, i.e. you've got a program that you're running for 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and then you've got blocks that are built into that 8, 10, 12-week program where you are automatically asked to back off a little bit on the volume, back off a little bit on the intensity, back off a little bit on both. And it works really well, especially for novice lifters. It kind of gives them an opportunity to acclimate to what training is going to look like. And it's not a bad thing to have those deload weeks built in because it takes some of the bandwidth away from you having to think about it and be considering kind of how you're feeling, how you're performing, and really trying to dial in, trying to optimize things. However, you do leave performance and training opportunities, gains, progress, whatever you want to call it, on the table when you just make an arbitrary decision to insert a deload week at week 5 or insert a deload week at week 11. And that's what we're going to talk about today because that was kind of the conversation that I ended up having with this athlete that I'm working with in regards to her own personal lifting and her own personal training. So interestingly enough, she actually had been training and had been running 3 consecutive blocks, I believe, at the point in time where we had to have this conversation, and she had yet to have a deload week built in. And I had done that intentionally because I was waiting for when this actually came up and we had to have this conversation. And I wanted to see how far we could kind of push her and push her lifting and push her training without making, again, that arbitrary determination of, hey, we're going to pull the plug at week 4 or hey, we're going to pull the plug at week 8. So she was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks into another 4-week cycle and had reached out, let me know, and said, motivation's down this week. Speeds are down this week. She's doing some VBT work. That's a whole different conversation we can have at a later date, later video, but she's doing some VBT work. Said speeds are down, weights are down. I kind of feel like trash. What the heck is going on? And the honest answer is, at that point in time, we had pushed her far enough where her nervous system decided that it had had enough. And that's really going to be the conversation we're going to have today. And the output, the performance, right, just wasn't there anymore. I want to make the point here that when you are doing true strength training, right, we're talking kind of force output training, not necessarily just the classic, I want to go in, get a little fluffy, throw on some muscle mass. We're talking true, genuine force output training. Her intention is to compete as a weightlifter at some point in time down the road. So we're working on some of those movements. A lot of that training and a lot of what we have her doing are very neurally demanding and neurally intensive, which means she's pretty typically not all that sore, but she can get fairly neurally fatigued and neurally shot. And that's really what you need to be paying attention to. And if we're going to have this conversation about actually waiting for the body to kind of force your hand, that is the whole concept of autoregulation. So autoregulation comes in many forms, and it's a pretty detailed topic, and it's something that we'll kind of dive into a little bit more in the future. But in this scenario, if you, instead of putting a block in that's intentionally stated as being a pullback week, and you wait for the body itself to start to throw you some signs that, hey, I'm not really functioning super optimally, my nervous system is a little bit taxed, is a little bit shot, and then you insert a deload week and you have the athlete pull back at that point, you could have bought yourself another 3, 4, 5. I mean, in this case, I think she was on week maybe 10 or 11. So you can buy yourself 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks sometimes of straight training if your body is willing to tolerate the loading and the volume and the intensity. And I think that is one of the primary reasons why auto-regulating your deload weeks, as opposed to just choosing when those deload weeks happen, allows you to try to maximize some of those gains and some of that progress and maximize really the time that you're spending in the gym and lifting. Now, I know I said signs kind of in, a couple minutes back. Typical signs of neural fatigue, and in this case, it's a little bit more specific in the sense that your autonomic nervous system, which is broken into your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and regulate, rest and digest, fight or flight, things of that nature. When that nervous system branch gets absolutely torched, it runs and regulates the majority of the systems in the human body, which means you can end up having some symptoms, presentations, signs, etc., that may not strike you as being typical or related to training. You can have pretty drastic and quick mood shifts. You can start to get a little brain foggy. Sleep quality can actually start to deteriorate. Appetite can actually start to just completely tank and go into the floor. A lot of times I've had athletes that have gastrointestinal distress. And all of these things are things that could potentially be overlooked unless you are trying to kind of consider them in relation to where in the program you are, where in the cycle you are, how intense things are getting, etc. So she had reached out, let me know, said, motivation's down, not sleeping super well, getting kind of tired, it's hard to move these weights around, speeds aren't quite there, and that is one great reason to use VBT, because VBT is kind of like a direct port to the nervous system in the sense that if you've worked with an athlete long enough, you can have predetermined movements and loads that should be moved at specific speeds. And if they're moving weights and loads faster than normal, you know that the nervous system's kind of on the up and up, and you might actually be able to eke out a little bit better performance. And you know that if the loads and the speeds are down, that's also a nice, good sign that athlete isn't functioning optimally, and that's okay. On any day-to-day basis, I believe the swing percentage-wise in nervous system functionality and output is about 20%. That means that on any given day, you could walk into the gym and your nervous system could be swinging roughly 20% above or below its kind of main static baseline. And that's something that you have to keep in mind because that is fairly typical and that's something that you've got to pay attention to. So if we decide that we want to put together or put our programs together in such a way that we have not built in our deload weeks, but we have decided to wait and let the athlete and their body kind of respond, and then we respond accordingly, what we typically are able to do is just, again, maximize the time, the energy, the intensity, the effort that's being put in the gym in terms of the progress that's able to be made. There's also another way to look at this, which is leaning more towards the recovery side of autoregulation, which is by arbitrarily putting a deload week into a program, we can also put it too deep into a training cycle. And in those circumstances and scenarios, we may actually force the athlete to push past where we normally would have wanted them to push. And then we've essentially overshot them to a degree that we wouldn't have normally wanted to overshoot them. And it's a fairly slippery slope if we decide that week 8 is going to be the deload week and our athlete at week 6 starts to kind of show some signs of fatigue and starts to show some signs of just general nervous system downtrending, now we've got to get them through the next 2 weeks where 9 times out of 10, week 7 is probably a heavier week than week 6, but they're already tanking. Like, now what do? So now instead of us maximizing the time, the energy, the effort that we're putting in and maximizing the training in the program that we've written, we're actually probably taking away from the program that we've written in the sense that they may actually regress a little bit because we pushed them way too far beyond the boundary that we were shooting for in terms of overreaching, overshooting, etc. So I know that next question is going to be, great, if I'm not going to build in my deload week, when the hell does the deload week go in? How do we make these determinations? Like, is there a way for us to plan ahead a little bit and say, yeah, I'm not putting this in the program, but I'm expecting it to fall on week blank or week blank or week blank? And the answer to that is kind of, but likely no. Kind of, in the sense that if you've spent any substantial amount of time with an athlete, you will likely get to know them to a degree or enough to be able to anticipate during certain blocks or certain training cycles with certain emphasis that they might be able to handle a little more of X and a little less of Y. And you can kind of have in your mind, like, yeah, I think given, what we're doing, they might make it to week whatever. And you've kind of got that in the back of your mind. But that's not the point. The point of all of this, right, is that we're not necessarily trying to anticipate. We're just trying to let the athlete and their body guide the training, which means as an athlete, you need to be willing to communicate to your coach when things seem to be going sideways and you've started to notice some of these signs, some of these symptoms creeping in your life that you may have kind of attributed to something different prior, right? Like maybe it was, you said I had a rough weekend out, or work's been stressful or something, money's not great, and you've kind of just written things off, but it may actually truly be related to the training or to the overall load on your system between work and life and stress and home and training and whatnot. So you got to be willing to communicate that information to your coach. And as a coach, you've got to be willing to accept that even if you wrote the perfect program and it's peaking at the right time and athletes trending in the right direction, you got to be willing to just put all that aside if they show up one week and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, things just don't look right. And that's where you got to pull the plug, right? All we're ever trying to do is maximize, optimize what we're doing in the gym and how it relates to what we want on the back end. And anything that we can do to make sure that time, that energy, that effort, the blood, sweat, and tears that you're pouring in are actually going to net output what you are expecting as an output. I know I just said this and I wanted to kind of bring it back up. You do have to really consider some of those life factors and the fact that our body is not able to compartmentalize things the way that we do, in the sense that we love to put things in buckets. So work stress is in bucket A and life stress is in bucket B and training stress is in bucket C. And sometimes we truly treat everything that we compartmentalize as acting on our body in separate compartmentalized fashions. And that is not the way that the body works. To the body, stress is stress, which means if you had a rough week at work and you worked 60 hours and then you got to the gym and you trained for 10 hours that week and you haven't been sleeping well and you've had to travel a bunch, those things add up. As much as we love to split them, they don't exist as a split entity when it comes down to how they impact us functionally as a human, both on a tissue physiologic level and on a neurologic level. Now, the point of this video was not to say or just entirely write off pre-planning in deload weeks. I have done it in the past and I still do it and I still will do it with some of the athletes that I work with. Again, a lot of this stuff is time, place, and circumstantial is probably the best way to say it. So if the circumstances are right or appropriate, if it makes sense for the athlete in question, there is no reason to reinvent the wheel and add in another layer to something. However, if you have an athlete that knows themselves pretty well and the training load is fairly heavy, it starts to make a little bit more sense to incorporate things that allow for that auto-regulation so that we are not pushing farther than we need to push, or pulling arbitrarily back way too hard, way too soon, when we could have eked out another 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks worth of training that could have essentially put a stimulus and netted an output that is closer to what we wanted and closer to what we were expecting out of the training. So if this is something that you have never tried, give it a try. That next time you go to sit down, whether or not it's you writing the program, coach writing the program, if you normally write in 4-week blocks, 6-week blocks, 8-week blocks, 10-week blocks, whatever you're doing, right where you would normally put a deload, don't. And I want you to just kind of push. So if you normally write in 4-week blocks, take your 4-week program and then just move straight into the next 4-week program without taking that 5th week as a deload and see how you feel. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Get down in the comments, let me know how you feel about the format. I'm definitely open, especially while the weather is good, to do a couple more of these more stream of consciousness walk and talks as opposed to the behind the desk talking head kind of vibe. But yeah, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you're an athlete and any of this information feels like it kind of hit home with you and you feel a little bit overwhelmed about how training is going for you currently, and this is something that you would like to talk about or work on, that is why I started Athletic Resilience itself. It is an athlete performance consulting company where I do virtual education sessions with athletes, regardless of what your sport of choice is, to try to help you work through some of these rabbit holes that inevitably come with being an athlete and training and trying to optimize performance and health and wellness. So if that is something that you feel like you need or something that you are interested in, hop on over to the website. It's athleticresilience.com. Link is down in the description. There is a quiz on the website that you can take that lets you know right away whether or not you are right for the services and right for athletic resilience. So it takes probably 5 minutes, just be honest. And otherwise, just check back in, keep watching the videos, and I'll keep putting out the content. Peace.